Continuing with our solving quadratic equations, today we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. On day 70, we talked about solving quadratics by factoring. We would use the zero product property, factor our quadratic, set each factor equal to 0, and then we were able to solve each factor independently to get our two solutions. If you remember before spring break when we did all of our factoring practicing, we had some quadratics that we couldn't factor. We would set up a diamond problem because it would look like we should be able to use that, and we wouldn't be able to find two numbers that multiplied to the top and added to the bottom. And we would write that it was prime because that means it's not factorable. And as an expression, that's the answer to your question. However, as an equation set equal to 0, now we are dealing with equations. We've got an equal sign and we're setting them equal to 0. If you have a quadratic in standard form equal to 0, we have something called the quadratic formula, which will find those solutions every time. It's a pretty complex formula. Some students learn it as a jingle or kind of a song. You know that I don't sing, so that's probably not going to happen here. I might find a nice link to a YouTube video and share that with you. But the quadratic formula will always work, and the nice thing about the quadratic formula is that it will be given to you on any type of standardized test. So if you do take I-STEP or something like that as a sophomore, they give this to you on the formula sheet. So we have to get our quadratic in standard form, and we're going to use these letters A, B, and C in the quadratic formula. And the A, B, and the C, those are just the numbers that go in that spot. So A represents the coefficient on x squared, B represents the coefficient on x, and C represents the constant. So the quadratic formula is this ugly thing here that says x is equal to negative b. This is plus or minus, so that means we're going to sometimes have negative b plus, and our second solution is negative b minus. So instead of writing the same thing out twice, we use the symbol plus or minus. So again, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of. So this is a big square root symbol. And underneath the square root, we have b squared minus 4ac. And it's all over. You'll hear me say all over every time. All over 2a. So this is a big fraction that gives us actually our two solutions to the quadratic formula. And what is super nice about the quadratic formula is that it always works. For any quadratic that you can put in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, quadratic formula only works when the right-hand side is 0. This will always give you the solutions. So even if the quadratic is factorable. So we're going to keep using this guy over and over and over again. And our first two examples, they've kind of got the little templates filled out for us. So again, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of, it's b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. They've left those blanks for us, so we need to know what a, b, and c are. I strongly suggest that you write them down. It is important that you take the signs with you, so I always write what is a, what is b, what is c. So in this first quadratic, our leading coefficient is a 1, so a is 1. B is the coefficient on the x term in the middle. This time it's negative 3. And c is the constant, 2. I kind of jumped the gun on this a little bit, and I didn't check that the right-hand side was equal to 0. I got lucky because it is, but you always want to check. So now it becomes a giant plug and chug problem. So we're going to plug those numbers in and chug out the answer. So it's negative b, so in the parentheses for b, I'm going to put negative 3. Then it's b squared minus 4ac under the square root sign, so b is negative 3, a is 1, c is 2. And it's all over 2a, and this time a was 1. So using the quadratic formula that's written up here in the right-hand side of your paper, I'm just plugging and chugging those in. And if it makes it easier, I'm just going to go ahead and write it here. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So those are the things that I'm plugging in. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense where those are going. This is not the hardest part of the problem. The hardest part of the problem is going to be simplifying it. So I'm going to leave this problem just in this form. I'm not going to go ahead and simplify it. I'm going to do that for examples 2 and 3, and then come back and do this for you at a later time. Right now, I just want you to see plugging these values in. So let's do that same thing for number 2, and then we'll look at simplifying them a little bit later. So number 2, I'm going to try to leave this so it all fits on the screen. We've got our quadratic formula. We also have it up here. Oh, that'll work, Miss Ball. It's up here above. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to use that to find our solutions to our quadratic equation. This is already set equal to 0, so that's nice. So we're going to label a, b, and c. So here a is 5, b is negative 1, because what number's out in front of this x, even though it's not written, it's a negative 1 because it's subtraction. And then our c is negative 3. It is super important that you take those signs with you, because if you don't, your answer will be incorrect. So that's why I do like to write out what these are equal to. It makes it easier for me to make less mistakes with the sign. So plugging them in, we have negative b, so b goes here, negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so again b is negative 1, minus 4ac, a is 5, c is negative 3, and it's all over 2a, so a is 5. So as we're doing these problems with quadratic formula, even if you make mistakes simplifying, because I am going to show you how to do that here shortly, even if you make mistakes simplifying, if I can see this part of your work, that shows me that you know the quadratic formula and you're plugging the numbers in the correct locations. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes when we go to simplify this, and that's okay. But please, please make sure that you get this much written down for me so I can see that you know which numbers need to go in which spot.